I wish you could see this from up here. What an extraordinary gathering this is. I am honored to be asked to begin this remarkable gathering and set the tone for 3 days of intense dialogue on Israel and Middle East peace in the context of living our Jewish values. Just join me for one moment, though. I hope you've had a chance to look through this remarkable program. Just join me for a minute in thanking Jeremy Ben-Ami and Adar Suskin and Rachel Lerner and the entire staff of J Street. And I am particularly pleased to be part of a program honoring 3 courageous and distinguished honorees. We meet in an extraordinary moment, obviously. Jeremy said, it would be very helpful to us if you could gin up some exciting events in the world before you came up to speak. I hope I've done okay, Jeremy, in that regard. The world is in flux. Shifting patterns of democracy and human rights, stability and tolerance are being reshaped as we meet throughout the globe. And likewise, our nation is at an alarming crossroads as the questions of the central role of the public sector in providing for the needy, the poor, the elderly, the children, the sick, the vulnerable is being redefined. Questions of protecting our environment, our health, our fundamental rights, including the right to organize, are being decided. At stake in this latter debate are 2 visions of America. One in which the government is seen as the enemy, the problem, the other, and the other in which the government is seen as us, about the way we go about achieving great things that the private sector cannot or will not do. We are deciding whether we will cherish or abandon the sense of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. In a world in which we are capable of doing almost anything, the central question we face is not a technological question or a scientific question. It is a moral question and a political question. It is a question of what we should do. And in that question, the religious community in general, the Jewish community in particular, has a distinctive contribution to make. We Jews have always known that. From Sinai, we brought forth a vision, a revolutionary notion of ethical monotheism that transformed all of human history. And from that time to this, we knew that values matter. Why? For both moral and practical reasons. For us as Jews on the moral ground, why do we care so much about social justice? Because God says so. Is it not self-evident that we cannot fulfill our destiny to be a light to the nations, that we cannot respond to God's central call to us to be a holy people if we retreat from struggles for justice, peace, and equality in our nation and in our world? This work of Tikkun Olam must play a powerful role in Jewish life simply because it is right, and God calls us to that task of righteousness. And 3,000 years of our forebears have insisted that we Jews do not continue for continuity's sake alone. We do not exist for existence' sake alone, but because we are called to a holy purpose and a holy mission, to be God's partners in shaping a better and more hopeful world. You shall be holy, for the eternal your God is holy. God commands in Leviticus. And how does God tell us? Can we strive to be godly? Can we manifest that holiness? By feeding the hungry and removing the stumbling block before the blind. By speaking out against injustice and paying the labor a fair and timely wage, by creating courts of justice and a marketplace that is fair and honest, or as we are told in Isaiah, by tearing apart the chains of the oppressed, dealing our bread to the hungry, bringing the homeless into the shelter of our homes, and ensuring that someday nations shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. That nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore. But God has said to us whether that dream will be made real here on earth is in our hands. As a great Orthodox Jewish scholar, Isadora Twersky, concluded in a seminal essay on the Jewish community's involvement in social service and social policy, one cannot claim to be a God-intoxicated Jew without having an unquenchable thirst for social justice. But the Jewish tradition also urges us to be practical in applying our values, setting out, for example, insofar as peace is concerned, standards for just war, for moral causes that legitimize the use of force, and moral means as to how they would be used in war, rules that speak to contemporary humanity across the ages, including Israel and the Palestinians, or in the concepts of the rights of the Ger Toshav, the resident alien, and relatedly, the rule of Mitnei Darchei Shalom, that for the sake of peace in any community in which Jews and non-Jews live together, the social benefits that the Jewish community would give to Jews must be fully accorded and afforded to non-Jews as well, a moral and practical basis for ensuring that Israeli Arabs have full rights in Israel. How then do we apply these values to Israel? If the world and the U.S. are at a crossroads, so too is Israel. At such a time, the core vision of J Street, that Israel's security, its moral destiny, the quality of life depends on a peace agreement with the surrounding countries that includes a free and viable Palestinian state, is urgently and vitally needed today. Israel might need to adopt short-term military strategies designed to protect the security of its people, to respond to terrorism, but military approaches alone cannot halt terrorism in the long run, and Israel's long-term strategic needs cannot be pursued through military means alone. Indeed, we have a blueprint for containing terrorism. Since 1967, the longest period of no deaths from terrorism and the fewest attacks were in the last years of the Oslo Accords, a potent antidote to those who say that the key lesson of Oslo was its failure to continue. I know that this audience does not need yet again to hear the compelling logic behind a two-state solution. I allow myself to stipulate that you are here because you share my belief, which was also Yitzhak Rabin's belief, which remains the belief of most Israelis, that a two-state solution is the only course that can assure both the safety and prosperity of the state of Israel and restore Israel's stature in the family of nations. It is the official policy of the government of Israel. It has been since '93. It is certainly the policy of the U.S. administration, and it is one that needs to be made real today. While Israel cannot control what its enemies do, it can control its own policies and actions that impede its ability to reach a diplomatic solution. Continued expansion of the settlements and the bypass roads, the destruction of Palestinian homes not connected to terrorism, the excesses at checkpoints, the lack of government response to aggressive and often violent behavior by settlers with respect to Palestinian communities and olive groves and neighboring villages are all such impediments. Further, the significant expansion of funding for settlements and bypass roads sap economic resources needed to support the social safety net in Israel at a time when inequality in Israel has reached so very dangerous proportions and its vaunted health and education system are under such pressure. Our own passionate support for Israel should lead us to criticize policies when we believe they are contrary to the long-term interests of Israel. Let me be clear. Israel must decide its own policies, but we cannot be idle bystanders to their deliberations. And we have a much more direct role in shaping America's policy, and that requires a Realpolitik effectiveness on J Street's part. Look, the creation and almost instant success of J Street was among the most exciting and promising developments in the Jewish community in recent years. A large degree of that is the result of the vision and talents of J Street's board and J Street's remarkable staff. There is so much of what J Street stands for and what you do that resonates with my own convictions and beliefs, and I count myself among J Street's most fervent fans. That said, There are going to be issues that divide us, issues that are difficult in how to best apply our values, issues that require complex and often uncertain strategic and tactical decisions. Let me just use one recent example to illustrate these dilemmas. What has made J Street so distinctive was first the breadth of your support in the Jewish community, from the left to the center, from young to old, from mainstream to progressive activists. And second, the unusual media and political traction it generated. Traction that is the key, indispensable factor in its potential success. And what was the source of that traction? I would suggest to you it was, above all, your connection with members of Congress, their endorsement of J Street and you of them, as well as the endorsement and support of prominent mainstream rabbinic and communal leaders. And these two dynamics are connected. Your attraction to people on the left is not that your message is that different from other Jewish dovish groups, but precisely because of the political and media attention and impact that engages their energy and excitement. You matter politically. You matter media-wise. And all of your members of J Street can feel that they are part of something that has influence and impact. You will, on the one hand, lose your energy if you lose your dovish activists, but you lose your political and media clout if you lose your mainstream wing. In assessing strategies and tactics, you need to consider not only the theoretical positions you take, but the tactical impact of those you choose. By maintaining your powerhouse, this is the place to make a difference image in reality, you strengthen your ability to take the most controversial positions when it really counts. But if you alienate the mainstream political and religious core of your support, you risk losing everything. Are there going to be moments in the history of Israel-U.S. relations where the significance of a momentous decision, which will really make a difference, require you to push the envelope? Perhaps even anger some of your mainstream political and religious constituency? Yes. But they must be few and far between, of the utmost importance, where you really have a chance to change the outcome by weighing in, and where you work diligently with your supporters on the Hill to bring them around to this decision, or find the least problematic formulation to them before you go for public. In my view, the recent decision to oppose the inevitable administration veto of the UN resolution on settlements raises concerns and debates in these areas. For whether doves or not, so many Jewish supporters of Israel distrust the UN in regards to Israel, so that any position that you take on it comes across as a vote for the UN on Israel generally, as opposed to the specific resolution that you may be addressing. The action that J Street took is symbolic. You had to know that it wasn't going to affect the administration. You know that the vast majority of the members of Congress that you support you while criticizing Israel's settlement policies do not support the UN condemnation, and you will put them all in a very difficult position, driving some to feel they have to choose between remaining with J Street. It was for some the straw that broke the camel's back, and many of the well-known reform and conservative rabbis who support you and are critics of Israel's settlement policy will not support this position, and you put them in a difficult position. And if they begin to move away from J Street, as they leave one by one, the seesaw begins to tip from your being something special, something both mainstream and left, something formidable because of who supports you, and something effective in actually shaping politics, to just another group that says the right things, but without real impact. Now let me be clear. This was a tough call. I don't begrudge either way. I'm merely laying out the arguments here. What might have happened is that J Street could have explained to the public that your diverse constituency is divided on this, but used the press interest to point out that if the administration vetoed it, as they did, even more so it is politically and morally incumbent on the U.S. to mobilize international support from Israel's friends and those supportive of the two-state solution to urge Israel to change its settlement policy. We could have launched a major campaign aimed at doing that. And we could have foreseen the inevitable message of the joint letter from Congress that was issued on this vote with its everything Israel done is right and everything the Palestinians do is wrong message. On that, We could have launched an all-out effort calling on our friends in Congress who are supporting the administration's veto to insist on a more balanced and realistic message, and rightly mobilized our members to make the public and advocacy argument, warning that it distorts reality, undercuts the administration's effort on the peace process, alienates Israel supporters who don't buy that simplistic message, and leaves other nations to give up on finding constructive approaches that will engage the U.S. Congress in changing Israel's policies, and thereby increases the chances that they will go to the UN in support of resolutions like that, like these. Now that's a battle you could have won and really made a difference in the tone and political dynamics on Capitol Hill. And we have another such battle coming up. Tea Party efforts to gut all of foreign aid, some gutting all aid to Israel, but some leaving Israel intact and gutting everything else, so that money for environmental protection and to combat poverty and to combat HIV/AIDS and to combat debt relief, all of this, to combat the burden of debt, all of this endangered while Israel remains secure is a disaster for Israel, a disaster for the United States, and we have to win that battle. I want to make just a brief comment on another looming community decision that will affect J Street. American World Jewry reaching a consensus that a key priority must be the battle to declare in international forum, against efforts in international forum using international law, that Israel is an illegitimate state so evil that, as with apartheid, the very notion of a Jewish state must be repudiated. Now this has key implications. If that is going to succeed, it must be as broad a tent as possible. The anti-delegitimization campaign will succeed only if we have wall-to-wall support. When the Jewish community needed to designate someone to speak for them at the Presbyterian Convention against the divestment resolution, the community turned to J Street, who had the pro-peace credibility to stunt the efforts of the anti-Israeli forces, and they were compellingly effective. They did so in Berkeley on the bus air fights, debating the Jewish Voices for Peace, pushing the U.S. Social Forum against BDS that was aimed at supporting delegitimization. APN, J Street, Meretz, Israel Policy Forum are staunchly pro-Israel peace groups that have the credibility to stand before strongly dovish non-Jewish groups and guide them away from delegitimization efforts. But if we're going to succeed, we have to distinguish between delegitimization and BDS under any circumstances. If we tell the people in the Presbyterian Church, in the international labor movement, the non-Jews who stand with us, Jewish kids on our college campus who fight for Israel there, that supporting the artist boycott in Ariel, or supporting a boycott of produce from West Bank settlements is the same as declaring Israel an apartheid state, where we're writing out of the community millions of Israel's passionate supporters and dooming the delegitimization effort. This is, as daunting as these challenges are, a time of hope, of which our ancestors, the prophets, our sages throughout the ages could only have dreamed. We are the first generation that produces enough food to feed every human being on earth. A failure to do so is a failure of moral vision and political will. We're the first generation that can conquer malaria, an array of diseases that have plagued humanity from time immemorial. The first generation that can educate every child on earth, undo damage to our environment, spread freedom across the globe. In all these, our failure to do so is a failure of moral vision and political will. And we're the first that has the capability to help nations find peaceful ways to resolve their differences, and we cannot afford to lack that moral vision and political will. For on all these issues, somebody will decide. And your only choice, my only choice, is whether we will be the audience watching others make those decisions, or we will be the authors of those decisions. And if we remain silent, in the vacuum of our silence will come voices that do not share our values, our dreams, our aspirations. In his remarkable Riverside Church speech on Vietnam, Dr. King said, "We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of countless civilizations are written the most pathetic epitaph of words, too late." J Street's pro-Israel, pro-peace vision is right. Its basic strategic goal of mobilizing mainstream forces together with progressive forces to stand assertively to peace and to support this administration's efforts, indeed encourage even more vigorous efforts for peace, is needed for Israel's sake now more than ever. This is not a time to retreat. Go forward with courage, for ours is an awesome agenda that in the end will prevail. And we must act before it is too late. Never before has our world, the U.S. or Israel, needed to hear more clearly the values of human dignity, charity, social justice, compassion, and peace that are at the core of the Jewish tradition. Out of this conference, one theme should resound. Neither humanity nor the countries of the Middle East are the prisoners of a bitter and unremitting past. But together we can, we must, we will be the shapers of a better and more hopeful future for Israel's children, for Palestine children, for all of God's children. That is our common role. It is God's call to us and our children's call to us as well. We are Jews, mandated to be the moral goads to the conscience of our nations, bearers of flames of justice and weavers of dreams of freedom for all God's children. And we must never cease until we make real that world of justice and peace our children so richly deserve. And the place to begin is between Israel and the Palestinians. May that be the blessing of this gathering. May that be the blessing of your lives.